Hello, everyone, my dear followers. Welcome to chapter 13 of this fanfic that has been with us on the channel for so long. If you haven't seen the previous installments, you can find them in a playlist on the channel. Without further ado, enjoy.
Konoha, the first Uzumaki clan head with Uchiha blood, and his team walked past the gate guards who once again could be seen pretty much napping, which earned them an odd look from the kunoichi of the team. Naruto just walked past them before turning around to face the team he was assigned to lead. Ignoring the glare Lee had been sending his way since he ended the Fuma settlement, Naruto addressed the group of genin before his eyes. "Our mission has been completed, you three are dismissed. I'll go and report on our mission to the Hokage." Naruto spoke calmly, getting a nod from Neji, a relieved sigh from Tenten, and no visible reaction from Lee. Taking this as their answers to his order, Naruto and Suisei, who was on his shoulder, disappeared in a small cyclone of black wind and crow feathers. Lee continued to glare at the spot that Naruto once held even after the raven-haired shinobi left the immediate area. Neji, seeing the funk that his usually cheerful teammate fell into, decided he could help him out while getting stronger. A win-win. "Lee, can I interest you in a spar? I would like to see how far I have come since our last match." The soft yet firm voice of his teammate brought the fuzzy-browed genin back to the real world and out of his dark thoughts. Recognizing the words that were spoken, a glimmering smile made its way onto Lee's expressive face. Immediately, the green spandex wearer assumed the nice guy position. "Of course we can, Neji-kun. Shall we leave for the usual place, so that we may prove how brightly our flames burn?" Neji cracked a small smirk, seeing that his old teammate was still there despite the sense of gloom that one could just sense around an emotional kind of guy like Lee. Nodding, the pale-eyed prodigy started to walk off towards Team 9's training ground to prepare himself for the upcoming fight. Lee's smile remained until he saw Neji was out of sight, where it was replaced with a sneer. "Once I can defeat Neji-kun without use of the inner gates, then I will be coming for you, Uchiha. Then when I defeat you, it will show that my way of the ninja is far more superior to your own." Meanwhile, in the office of the Hokage, a sudden gust of crow feathers that came in through the open window came to a halt directly in front of Minato, who was more than aware of Naruto's impending visit. Waiting patiently for his son to come to view, the blue-eyed fire shadow leaned back into his chair. And finally, Naruto came to full view with his Sharingan fully alive and spinning as he stared back into his Kage's inquisitive stare. The silent stare-down continued for the better part of the next 2 minutes before Minato finally asked for Naruto's report on the mission. "The mission was completed with me destroying the entirety of the Fuma settlement, though there were a few complications. The first was when Tenten was captured by the enemy, and I was forced to save her, where I learned that someone had leaked our plans to the Fuma." Naruto ended coolly by blowing the bang over his eye out of his field of vision, though his eyes did narrow as he went over the potential people he'd target as potential traitors. He was sure that Suna was an obvious choice, but maybe it was too obvious of a choice to think it was them, and then closed the book. Minato closed his eyes as he went over what this could mean for both Konoha and the entirety of the Land of Fire. If it was true that Suna was working to weaken the Hidden Leaf, then Konoha would lose its only major ally in a time where nothing was certain, something he couldn't afford for his village's sake. That was why it was crucial that they acted after they went over every possible situation before acting and throwing accusations towards their neighbors in Kaze no Kuni. "What is your whole take on what happened on this mission?" as the commanding officer, looking past his Kage and out of the window and into the village down below, the raven-haired son of the Hokage ran his finger along Suisei's sleek feathers. The Sharingan-wielding Uzumaki conveyed his thoughts on the matter. "I believe that Suna is a believable option if you chose to pursue it, but I can't say for sure because something forcibly expelled me from the leader's mind before I could get any kind of intel out of him." Naruto informed his village leader with a hint of regret regarding his own failure. "Yes, Suna is a likely candidate, but we must be careful with this because as it stands they are an ally, our only ally amongst the major villages. That still wouldn't stop them from dealing a blow to us if they thought they could get away with it." Minato conceded to the fact that Suna being the weakest of the elemental nations and would clearly like to get out of the basement. Nodding slowly, Naruto tried to speculate as to why Suna would do something like this when the risk far outweighed the reward. "You said that you were ejected from the man's mind? I assume this was while you tried to use your Sharingan." Minato asked, looking for more information, and on cue when the word Sharingan left his lips, the three tomo in his red eyes began to spin lazily like they knew they were being mentioned. Well, I tried to take a peek into his mind when he said he knew that my team was coming, but before I could really make my presence, I was knocked out of his mind, and then he was killed by some sort of internal brain damage. Possibly a seal. Naruto offered with a slight shrug that forced Suisei to adjust to find a new roosting position on his shoulders. Minato made a sound that went like as he thought what that could mean for this whole puzzle, and only came to one person in Suna, and that was the elder Chiyo, but Naruto didn't need to know any more than he did. After all, he was still only his Chunin. Sighing, Minato addressed Naruto once more with his eyes and his voice. Very well, you did splendid considering the unfavorable circumstances you were dealt with from the very start of this mission. You have done your village proud, Naruto. He spoke in a professional tone that would keep Naruto from finding his true feelings. Not to mention me, even if you don't see me as your father. The Uzumaki clan head simply nodded his head before he and Suisei vanished in the same way they had entered the office, leaving Minato alone once more. We may not have any kind of personal relationship, son, but our working relationship is nothing short of phenomenal, and at least it is something. I can only hope there is a day where you can forgive us for our foolishness. Minato prayed silently as he looked at the sun that was just being covered by a large cloud hiding its brightness. A grunt escaped from Naruto's lips when he felt the jarring impact of a fist slamming into his chest. Taking the blow in stride, Naruto reached and grasped the wrist that was attached to the fist, but found that he was simply grabbing at a substitution log. The raven-haired Nin furrowed his brow in agitation, since this was a repetitious happening in the spar Naruto found himself engaged in. Hearing the slight whizzing of a kunai cutting through the air behind him, the red-eyed Uzumaki brought his hand up into the sign of the ram, performing a spotless shunshin. Naruto didn't even need smoke to cover his movements, showing just how far he had come since he started training with the scroll Shursui had gifted to him just before his death. My Naruto, and you sure have gotten awfully fast. I see you really are picking up the gift that Shursui-kun had. A soft voice spoke as Makoto stepped out of the shadows provided by a tree on the training ground. Makoto's Sharingan watched as Naruto released the sign he used to provide his burst of speed. Naruto let a very Uchiha monopolized smirk cross his face, hearing the praise coming from his pseudo-mother. Of course I am. I can't let Shursuine's wish go down the drain just because there are more things to try and hold my attention. Plus, being fast is always a nice ace to have up the sleeve, but I can get faster. That statement was completely true because there were a number of shinobi throughout history who pushed the boundary of human limits when it came to speed, and two of those men were still alive in this time. Makoto nodded in approval, glad that her surrogate son was such a steadfast man that would stick to his belief, something that made for a great leader. And she just knew that Naruto would eventually become the leader he was destined to be. Slowly, the Uchiha clan head went through a series of hand signs that Naruto went through as well. That is always good to hear, Naruto. Now let us see how you picked up on the jutsu you asked for during our last session. Lightning release, flash dance. Makoto and Naruto called out at the same time, performing the same technique. The lightning release. Flash dance was a technique that someone could mix with their taijutsu to strike their opponents with an extended range. This required that the shinobi or kunoichi to use an extreme amount of chakra control to create chakra lightning that would shoot out of their elbows and fists. Since both had the Sharingan, they could get the ratio down pat, but since Makoto's experience exceeded Naruto's, her lightning struck first, leaving Naruto to be struck across the cheek by an enclosed fist. Stumbling back a few steps, Naruto frowned as his hand gently touched the bruised skin on his cheek. I don't look like that, Naruto. After all, I was a jounin before the clan went all haywire, and our frequent spars have only helped put me back in shape. Thank you for that, by the way. Makoto expressed her gratitude with a bright smile on her face. She had never felt better, and she knew it was because of Naruto's drive to be better that somehow had infected her as well. Naruto looked over to his partner for this spar, but instead of answering her gratitude civilly like any normal person would, Naruto decided for a more shinobi-esque fashion by throwing a fireball at the woman. Makoto's crimson eyes widened in surprise at the sight of a moderately sized sphere of hissing flames making a beeline for her position. Acting quickly, the Uchiha matriarch performed a spotless substitution, leaving a log to be roasted in her stead. Appearing right behind the person responsible for riffling off the fire-release jutsu, with an annoyed scowl on her face, Makoto glared at the two clan emblems on the back of his blue vest. Shaking her head sadly, Makoto made a small tsk sound like she was chastising a child for doing wrong. Didn't anyone teach you that it is impolite to shoot a fireball at someone, especially when that same person is thanking you for helping them? Well, I guess that whoever taught me manners just skipped over that part. Some kind of teacher they were. I wonder where they are now. Naruto mused aloud, fully aware that it was Mikoto who taught him his manners, and that it would irk her to no end. A smirk made its way onto his face when his surrogate mother didn't have an immediate response. Oh, you little smart. I guess I will have to reinstall that sense of humility into that head of yours before it explodes from the swell. I can't have my darling little Naruto turning into some self-righteous jerk. Lightning release. Shocking inspiration, the female Uchiha shouted with a small, sadistic smile on her face as 2 bolts of electricity came from her feet and traveled towards the stationary Naruto. She smiled when she saw the shocking chains crawl up Naruto's back, but frowned when the younger Leaf Nin didn't make a sound despite the pain that should have been coursing through his body. Before Mikoto could make another move, Naruto's body was shrouded by a light, faint glow that alerted Mikoto to what was a shadow clone that was preparing to do, and that was to detonate, but she was a step too late because the clone had already went off and ended itself. The Uchiha clan head was close enough that she was sent rocketing into a tree with an audible thud. Appearing before her in a shunshin with a kunai pointed down at her, Naruto spoke. Looks like I finally won, Mikoto-chan. The smile on Naruto's face dropped when all of a sudden Mikoto's body changed to a mass of lightning that scattered across the ground. Before he could react, his body tensed when he felt a pair of arms wrapping around his shoulders and the edge of a kunai pointed up under his chin. Now what was that about winning, Naruto-chan? The raven-haired son of the Yellow Flash growled slightly, but in the end he relented to yet another loss to the elder Uchiha. Shut up. That doesn't matter now because we are starting again. With that defiant shout, Naruto once again shunshined out of Mikoto's grasp and was already reaching for Twilight. Mikoto watched Naruto flow lightning through his black, white, and gray katana with a smile because sparring with Naruto was the most fun she could find in the village and she was going to enjoy it. Nanabai secret art. First hive. Following the feminine but energetic shout came a thick wave of black buzzing that came with the chakra-digesting beetles that the Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails was capable of commanding. Fu watched on intently from the air with the help of the wings that were gifted to her by her tenant that was keeping her stabilized in the air. The mint-haired girl watched on, opting to stay back to see just how her opponent would counter her beginning move of this spar. Naruto watched as his so-called slave fired a wave of chakra-hungry insects at him that reminded him of his time working with Shino of Team 8. Not wanting to become anyone or thing's lunch, Naruto went through the appropriate hand signs for the Uchiha clan's favorite jutsu of any element. Fire release. Grand fireball. From the ravenette's open mouth spewed a massive ball of flames that easily overtook the wave of little parasites, leaving a lingering scent of burnt bug to fill the air. Sadly, the insects continued on like small, fiery kamikaze that were hell-bent on colliding with Naruto before they finally died from the intense flames. What an annoying, persistent batch of little parasites, Naruto thought as he used his 3 Tomo Sharingan to weave and duck out of the mini-missiles that the bugs had become. Once the flaming nuisances had become non-existent, Naruto followed up with another jutsu abusing his absurdly large chakra reserves. Wind release. Drilling air bullet. Naruto's shout was drowned out by the sudden blast of wind that came from his mouth, aimed directly at his fellow Jinchuriki with intent to incapacitate. Who Naruto knew had a lot of chakra herself, not as much as him mind you, but plenty in her own right. Luckily for the airborne, tanned kunoichi, she was already prepared for what was Naruto's typical combat style, using his massive chakra. Just a moment after Naruto launched his sphere of spinning winds, Fu had finished the sign that she needed for her jutsu. Water release. Gunshot. Fu cried out as a thin line of water came firing from her mouth before it turned into a sphere of water that rivaled Naruto's drilling wind. The resulting collision of water and condensed wind created a loud hiss, and a bath of water was quickly blown up into the air and scattered by a natural wind that blew across the land. Naruto remained stoic while Fu was grinning as the slow drizzle fell over the two. You know, Naruto-kun, you aren't the only one that has a ton of chakra to throw around and then some to spare. I can go at this all day, but I do have a leg up in Biju chakra control with Chome here. Fu bragged, patting her stomach, solidifying her claim as he green bug wings kept her afloat in the sky, acting as a constant reminder. As much as I hate to agree with my weaker brother's container, she does have a point. Perhaps we should start working with my chakra while we are still together. Ninjen. The dark but necessarily evil voice of the QB drew Naruto into his thoughts where he contemplated his tenant's suggestion. It was definitely an idea worth merit, and he wasn't exactly sure why he hadn't asked the QB for its chakra when he had been asking for information. Was he fearful of the massive amount of power the QB possessed even while being a shell of itself? I think that is a good idea, but we need somewhere more private than this village if we want to do such a delicate procedure. And are you actually offering to help me? Naruto asked the being of pure chakra, honestly surprised by this development because more than not the fox was lazy and outright just uncooperative, not willingly helpful. If Naruto was to look into the cage in his mindscape, he would be able to see the huge tick mark building its way across the giant fox's brow while he curled his lips into an angry scowl at what Naruto was insinuating. Why would he, an almighty being, be willing to help an insignificant mortal? It was just absurd. Listen here, you little sack of flesh. I am not helping you. I am helping myself because I will not let my container be weaker than any of my brothers' of sisters' containers. Naruto rolled his eyes, ignoring the prideful rambling that the QB was currently going on about. If you don't want to take my word for it, I can always give you a demonstration. It really wouldn't be any trouble. Actually, it may be a lot of fun. Fu spoke tauntingly with a small smirk as a light cloak of green energy sprouted to life and surrounded both her right forearm and her wings. Before Naruto could try to deny her oh-so-gracious offer, Fu had already closed the distance and drove her shrouded arm right into Naruto's stomach, making him feel as if an enlarged Akimichi fist had smashed down and put all its pressure against his stomach. Fu looked at Naruto's face from the corner of her eye with a smaller, victorious smile on her face, as she felt Naruto gasp for air hunched over her forearm. All she needed to do was pulse her chakra, a rather simple trick, and pow, Naruto was gone and sent flying, but first she needed to see if he would yield. Naruto-kun, I think it is best you forfeit before you get really hurt. A Bijuu's chakra is nasty stuff. Fu advised, letting nothing bleed into her voice except a tone of pure factual correctness. She frowned though when Naruto didn't even move from his spot, leaving her to wonder if he was okay or not. Naruto suddenly broke the silence with a small chuckle that Fu could easily hear, but she couldn't quite find any humor in Naruto's situation. Soon enough, Naruto's Sharingan, I looked right into Fu's orange eye, casting a very subtle genjutsu that he hoped bought him 3 seconds. No sooner than Naruto had done that, the sound waves entering Fu's ears became distorted. Don't worry, Fu girl. I will get rid of this feeble genjutsu right away. Chome spoke happily as his potent chakra easily broke his container out of the small Sharingan-induced genjutsu in less than 10 seconds, which was no time really considering the situation the two combatants were in. Fu shook her head, looking at Naruto, who returned to being stoic. You know, genjutsu doesn't work on people like us, Naruto-kun. What you said earlier was right. You are a better Jinchuriki than I am, Naruto admitted, swallowing his pride with a smile. He then raised his hand slowly and tapped her on the forehead. But I just may be the better shinobi. Uzumaki Fuinjutsu. 6 station shut down. Fu's eyes went wide in alarm when 2 bright circular orbs lit up on her legs that had the kanji for stop in them, followed by 2 on her arms. 1 on her stomach, and finally the one where Naruto's fingers were touching. Suddenly all the points linked together and the mint-haired Jinchuriki felt all the power suddenly leave her power, and she crumpled to the ground, conscious but incapable of movement, cursing as Naruto straightened out. Silence filled the space until there was an excited shout from the sidelines of the field right near the apartment complex Naruto and Fu inhabited. That was so cool, boss. You gotta teach me that move. Konohamaru shouted, his squeaky voice rising and falling in decibels as he shouted out his excitement. He had been there the whole time, watching the whole spar since the beginning, and he was definitely sure that his boss was the coolest shinobi in Konoha, at least. I will teach you that when you learn your elemental affinity. Then after that you need to learn at least 3 jutsu for it. Naruto lectured his little admirer with a stern tone, trying not to smirk when he heard how pathetically he was whining about not learning the super cool, paralyzing seal thingy, as he put it. Standing on a steady, thick branch that was extending out of a tree off to the side, the red-headed daughter stood there watching with a bitter smile as she watched Naruto treat Konohamaru like a younger brother. Deep down, however, Naomi knew that she could not blame Naruto for that because she knew all of the fault fell on them and how they treated Naruto. The violet-eyed Chunin's hand clenched around the trunk of the tree as a way to deal with the frustration of watching Naruto act like a big brother to someone else. That could have been her if she wasn't such a spoiled brat growing up, and she hated it. The brisk shaking of her head had her vibrant, red locks swaying back and forth with the movement of her head as she shook away the more selfish thoughts she was having. No, this isn't right. I can think like this. Nissan looks happy, but it still hurts to see what I could have had. I wonder what it feels like to be on the other side of that cool personality of his. Naomi thought longingly of created times where she was younger and Naruto was the big brother she wanted but didn't deserve, but that was just it. They were created by her imagination. Naomi was so far in her own self-indulgence that she failed to notice that the person in the forethought had appeared behind her in a silent wind shunshin. Standing there, Naruto wondered when she would notice him, and after a few moments Naruto realized that she wouldn't be picking up on his presence anytime soon. Looking up into the leaves overhead that let in beams of sunlight at random places, the Uzumaki clan head decided he had some time to kill. Silently hopping back to a tree branch extending out right behind the one Naomi was standing on, Naruto lowered himself into a sitting, cross-legged position. Letting out a melancholic sigh, Naomi slowly turned her body around only for it to immediately tense when she saw the sight of her brother sitting there across from her, with his eyes closed, looking completely relaxed. Her jaw fell a few times as she tried to mutter out something coherent, looking down at her brother. Naruto cracked open one eye, hearing the commotion in front of him, only this time there was no Sharingan but his oceanic blue that had slowly been losing its cold glint. Brining her hand up to her heart, Naomi let go of the shocked sigh she was holding in as her body came down from the high of surprise. "What are you doing here? Weren't you talking with the third's grandson?" The redhead asked, trying not to shout in excitement. Internally, though, there was a chibi Naomi dancing around like a fool, since it wasn't very often that she was able to talk to her brother in a one-on-one setting like this one, and she surely didn't want to squander this chance. "Yes, I was. About an hour ago, that is," Naruto replied, taking amusement in the shocked expression that was plastered on his very expressive sister's face. He wasn't sure why, but he was feeling a lot less hostility for his sisters as of late, and even more so when he found himself in private with one of them. Cracking his neck, Naruto waited for Naomi to regain her lost composure. Naruto assumed that the way she was looking at him, that she was expecting him to just up and vanish if she said even the slightest thing wrong, which had him smirking a bit. Using his palm to brush the bang hanging over his left eye out of the way, Naruto returned to staring at his sister, who was clearly happy but also antsy. "However, I am not here to talk about a measure of time. Do you care to tell me why you are spying on me, Naomi?" Naruto asked, and just like that, the small flickers of warmth in his voice were replaced by iron, showing he was ready to make a judgment after she had explained herself. Naomi's violet eyes widened at the way that Naruto made it seem like she was doing something scandalous. Immediately she blushed and began to wave her hands in front of her frantically to try and stop Naruto from getting the idea she was some stalker like Hinata who wouldn't stop stalking her. It isn't like that, Nissan. I wasn't spying or stalking you or anything like that, Databane." Naruto's lips curled into the faintest of smirks when he heard his sister's nervous stammering ending with a verbal tick. It was even funnier because Naomi too realized what she said, and the blush on her face got even darker than the color of her hair. Naomi couldn't believe that the one time she managed to talk to Naruto alone, that she had totally made a fool of herself. Then, like a switch flipped, Naomi's demeanor got much quieter, almost meek. "I was just watching you spar with that girl from Taki, and then you started to talk to Konohamaru, and then I got lost in my thoughts and I wanted to ask you to maybe help me with my wind training?" Naomi asked weakly, looking at Naruto like she was afraid that he was going to hit or scold her. Naruto, who felt the unease coming from Naomi, hummed softly as he looked at his sister. "That may be true, but there is something else in your eyes that you aren't sharing with me. I won't give you my answer until you tell me what else is on your mind." "That is my decision, Naomi," Naruto insisted calmly, still sitting in the same position he had been for the last hour as he looked at her expectantly. Looking unsure, Naomi eventually crumbled and took a seat on her tree branch, looking right back at Naruto, struggling to put what she wanted to say in words with Naruto sitting there right before her eyes. It was like a 1,000-pound weight had been set upon both of her shoulders. Her eyes slowly moved from Naruto's cool blue to the green grass covering the ground underneath the tree that they were sitting on. Swallowing down the lump of uncertainty that had settled down in her throat, Naomi began speaking in a whisper, a vulnerable one. It was just that when I saw you treating Konohamaru like a little brother, I couldn't help but let my mind wander. I still want that from my brother, even if we are triplets. I want that big brother. Naruto could hear the bitterness in her tone but chose to let her vent it all out before he gave his own response to her. I realized that growing up none of us really did anything for you except make you feel alone and like that you weren't cared for. I really do. But things have changed. I have changed. Why can't you treat me like a sister instead of a distant acquaintance? Why can't you forgive me and show me the same affection that you do with someone who isn't even blood? Why? Naomi shouted at her brother, hot tears rolling down her cheeks, her chest heaving with distress. The stare that the redhead was leveling Naruto with made him sigh to himself as he gathered his thoughts. Things are never that easy, Naomi. There is no just black or just white. There are many different shades in this world. That past you so easily reference is something of a scar to me. It is a reminder of a time where I was dependent on others, and because of that I was treated like a disease. That is the reason I can't forgive you, because it would be like forgetting what drove me, something I am not ready to do. Perhaps in time I will be, but not yet. Naruto spoke confidently but softly, and because his hubris wouldn't allow him to admit he wasn't quite strong enough yet to welcome such a touching subject back into his heart. Sniffling a bit, Naomi wiped away the fresh tears staining her cheeks, looking at Naruto in silence as she tried to understand his reasoning. He's right. Even though it is difficult for someone to change, it is even more difficult to forget, let alone forgive. I was acting like that selfish brat I was when we were younger. At least he is willing to try to forgive me in time. Naomi thought, with a small amount of glee finding its way into her in the sign of a small smile. Now that you have told me what is on your mind, I do believe that I owe you some training, Naruto said with a small sigh as he popped his neck a few times before standing up on his feet, stretching out his back. Naomi let out a small cheer and attempted to jump to Naruto's branch to hug him. This was not meant to be, because a light gust of wind suddenly blew, almost knocking Naomi off her branch. It would have worked too if Naomi had not clung to the surface of the wood using her chakra. There will be no hugging. You used up an excuse for that back when I was in the hospital after fighting Gaara. Ignoring the pout, Naruto vanished in a wind shunshin, reappearing in the center of his training field with his arms crossed, with Naomi appearing a moment later in a smoke shunshin, showing that Naruto was further ahead in the art than his sister. Seeing that his sister was taking this seriously, Naruto looked at her intently. Tell me what you have been told thus far about the element of wind? Naomi blinked once as she brought her finger up to her chin and repeatedly tapped her finger against it while her eyes moved to the sky, an action many performed when trying to recall something they were told earlier. Nodding with a smile, the red-headed Namikaze looked to her brother with a grin. Tsunade told me that when using wind, the goal is to hone it together, kind of like two blades grinding against each other until they are in unison. Then wind can be used to cut anything. Before he even knew it, Naruto found that he was scoffing at multiple things that Naomi had said. The first was that her father was the one who gave this information, and second, that information was severely limited to what was common knowledge. Naruto's scoff had Naomi narrow her eyes at him, wondering if he was doubting her skills. Something she didn't like anyone doing, not even her wayward brother. Thank you for giving me the definition that any chunin with access to a library could have given. It doesn't surprise me that you aren't aware that wind can do such more. With that piece of information, all of the negative emotions the holder of the Kyubi-zen chakra was feeling vanished under a wave of curiosity and excitement. Cocking her head to the side, Naomi looked at Naruto questioningly. There is more to wind than cutting things? I thought it was the cutting that made wind the most offensive element. The sun is often said to be what keeps us alive. Naruto began, suddenly leaving Naomi confused as to why he was talking about the giant ball of gas now of all times. But that is only half of the equation. Wind, or maybe I should say the oxygen in the wind, is just as important to our survival. If the sun is capable of keeping us safe and protecting us from death, why can't wind when they are identical pieces in the same puzzle? The raven-haired Uzumaki asked rhetorically as his blue eyes pandered over to the clouds floating overhead, a habit picked up thanks to Shikamaru. With the further explanation, everything fell into place for Naomi, like the puzzle Naruto was speaking about as a metaphor. Now fully intrigued and ready to work, Naomi leaned forward, bouncing on her heels and grinning like crazy. I get it now, Nissan. How do I get the wind to protect me like you do when you use your Fujin no Yoroi? Thinking about how great it would be to use the jutsu of her brother's creation, Naomi grinned even wider. If you want to use my technique, then you must be willing to trust the wind to not cut and dismember your body. You can't try to force it to cut what you want, but you must let it act as it will. I want you to let your chakra saturate the air for the next few minutes. Normally this would only take a moment, but you are just starting off, so we will take our time with this step. Naruto spoke, activating his Sharingan so that he could tell his student when she had used enough chakra and could start the next step. The red-headed Jinchuriki nodded her head, not really sure about all of that wise stuff Naruto was going on about, but she trusted her brother enough that he would not let her chop herself into slices. Clasping her hands together like any non-Jinchuriki would do to break a genjutsu, she started to forcibly expel her chakra into the air around her. The black-haired clan leader watched on with a scrutinizing eye, waiting until the chakra she was producing saturated the air enough. It was the better part of a half an hour before Naruto signaled Naomi to cut off the chakra she was constantly producing. Letting her torso slump forward, Naomi started to pant from exhaustion as she estimated that she had just let go of about 60% of her chakra. The three tomo in his eyes made it easy for Naruto to pick up the massive quantity of chakra in the air. Okay, now that there is a sufficient amount of chakra in the air, I want you to try and begin to sense for your chakra mixed into the air, and then call it back to your body. The daughter of the Hokage nodded slowly and closed her eyes and extended her senses, where she quite easily found her chakra. Happy by this success, she tried to pull on it, wanting to steam through this process in hopes of impressing her brother. After what felt like the 100th try, she opened her eyes, the frustration as clear as the twitch of her brow. Are you sure this is possible? It's like trying to pull something that can't be grasped, Databane. Naruto smirked softly at his annoyed sister because it brought back flashbacks of his own struggles with this part of the process, and it was rewarding to see someone else frustrated with his technique. A perk of being the creator, he supposed. This is something that not many people can do. You see, trying to control chakra that has already left your body is 100 times more difficult than controlling the chakra inside of you. Even sensors who are extremely aware of chakra around them cannot do this without a grand amount of effort. The amount of effort and chakra easily sways people and has them quitting. Are you going to quit, Naomi? The mention of quitting before the job was done immediately brought a determined fire into the eyes of Naomi. She knew she couldn't let her brother down, especially when he was willing to teach her his own jutsu. She shook her head furiously and started to try and pull her chakra back with a new sense of determination. Maybe we are alike, Naomi, Naruto thought as he sat down and unsealed a scroll from his wrist. Before Naruto even knew it, the moon and stars had taken place of the sun in what seemed to be like a flash, but in reality was the better part of 5 hours. Silently, Naruto cursed his laser-like focus for making him lose track of time. Looking down, Naruto could see a few seals he had been working on over this period of time and saw that none of them were quite complete yet. This whirlpool shadow stylized so damn complicated even at the beginner stage. After rolling up his scroll of unfinished seal matrices, Naruto resealed the scroll itself and looked up to see Naomi grinning down at him. Standing up, Naruto was curious as to why she was looking like that. The silence became too much for Naomi to bear thanks to the great news she had. Look, Nissan. I did it, Databane. She shouted happily as she showed Naruto her forearms, which were covered by a thick shroud of wind. However, she frowned after examining it further. Hey Nissan, why doesn't my wind look like yours did? That is very impressive. When I started off, the wind would only cover my hands. Taking a step closer, Naruto ran a hand through his black locks, looking at the wind gathered around his sister's forearms. That is because there is a third step. I didn't mention this because I did it where the wind covered all of my body first, but since you already mastered the Rasengan, this step should be easy. Spin the wind. Looking into Naruto's eyes, which had faded back to their natural oceanic shade, Naomi nodded with a wide grin. As Naomi applied the same concept of rotation to the wind on her arms as she did during Rasengan training, Naomi's grin shifted into a bright smile that almost lit up the dark training field when she saw her wind become just like her brother's. I did it! She shouted, throwing her arms up while the technique faded due to her lack of concentration. Before Naruto could even react, there was a red blur, then a sudden weight impacting his chest. The shinobi didn't even need the red breaking the peripheral of his vision to figure out that Naomi had hugged him once again. Sighing, Naruto went to push his sister away but stopped when he heard a light snore escape from her mouth. The blue eyes of Naruto could be seen blinking in rapid succession in surprise. She fell asleep, Naruto said to himself, and instinctively Naomi squeezed Naruto a little tighter. A soft groan escaped Naruto's lips when he realized that meant he would have to bring her to the Namikaze estate. His least favorite place possibly on the earth. Why is it always me who has to put up with this? Must you mock me constantly, Kami? Naruto spoke out in what could be thought of as a whine. Even still, this complaint didn't stop Naruto from picking his sister up bridal style. Adjusting to the new position, Naomi nuzzled her head into his chest, making Naruto sigh before he vanished in a vortex of black wind. Appearing right outside of the Namikaze estate, the raven-haired shinobi walked down the same cobbled path he fled from not so long ago, all the while his sister was sleeping comfortably in his arms. Getting to the front door, Naruto assumed the seals let him thanks to the blood in his veins, otherwise this place needed a serious security upgrade. Naruto kicked the front door 3 times, recreating a knock since his hands were obviously quite full. Naruto could hear the sound of footsteps approaching the other side of the door and waited silently. "What can I do for you?" He heard the sound of Kushina's voice before she had even opened the door all the way. Not answering, Naruto began an internal countdown until she realized who he was carrying, and then on cue. "Naomi-chan," she shouted quite loudly, that quickly brought about Minato appearing behind her shoulder. "She is fine. She exhausted herself training." Naruto's firm voice caught both parents' attention and stopped them from losing it. Minato and Kushina looked up and both relaxed, seeing that it was Naruto carrying their daughter. It took them a moment to realize that it was Naruto, and his appearance itself brought up some questions. "She was training with you? What were you guys training in?" Kushina asked, hoping to get some information on her son. She was smiling, seeing that her children were getting along, even if Naruto could care less what happened to she and Minato. At least her babies were civil, and it appeared Naruto was kind enough to bring his sister home. "I would prefer to keep that between Naomi and myself, Kushina." This had the red-haired mother sigh sadly but nod nonetheless. She knew it was better to respect his wishes than try to force him into something. And it must have been working since he started to use her name. Yeah, she would take what she could get. Minato took this chance to get into the conversation between his son and wife with a small smile. "Naruto, do you think you can take Naomi-chan to her bedroom? Kushina-chan and I are going over some important paperwork at the moment," Minato asked while sighing internally. He knew from Narumi that Naomi had gone off to do something, but he was still relieved to see his daughter back home, sleeping or not. Thinking it over for a moment, Naruto reluctantly nodded and stepped through the threshold of the house once the 2 guardians of the estate made room for him to do so. Not looking back, Naruto made his way up the stairs to where he assumed Naomi's room would still be. Nudging the semi-open door with his foot, Naruto made his way into the room that was only illuminated by the moon's light. The raven-haired boy used his wind manipulation to unfold Naomi's blanket. Walking towards the bed, Naruto slowly lowered her in and then gently tucked her in the bed, and just as he was about to step away, he heard her mumble something. "Thank you, Nisan." Naruto's body froze because with the amount of affection in her voice, she may as well have called him Naruto-kun instead. Turning slowly, Naruto looked down at the peacefully sleeping girl with a conflicted expression in play. What should he do in a situation like this? He cursed Itachi and Mihawk for never teaching him how to react to something like this. "You are welcome, Naomi," Naruto whispered in response, bringing a content smile to his sleeping sibling's face, as if she somehow consciously recognized his voice despite being completely asleep. Naruto stood there because for just a split second he almost instinctively called her little sister, Imato. With all of these confusing emotions swirling around him, the raven-haired swordsman quickly left the room and started to walk down the hallway, planning to leave. Then he came to the door of his old room and stopped, staring at it as memories from the past came flowing back to him. Memories of his crying as he tried to recover from a beating that had happened on any given night. Without even thinking, Naruto walked forward and opened his door to find his old room was still decorated in the Spartan style. Empty. His eyes did linger on a large pile of notes sitting on his old desk. Curious as to what they had said, Naruto pulled out the chair and began to read each one of them. As Naruto read each note, he found that a smile was put on his face, and then it grew as he read more. Each of the notes was from one of his sisters, each note an admission to how guilty and sorry they felt and how much they wanted him to come back. And the shocking thing was that there were hundreds of them from each of them. Then Naruto realized something that made him snarl. There were no notes from either of his parents, this fact only reminding him why he hated the two. This is why we will never be the family they desire, because it is all lip service. They don't show any sign of true regret. They are just the same as they were when I was a child. Minato and Kushina. Minato, who with the rest of the council had just sat through another extremely drawn-out monthly rundown from the civilians on how they thought the civilian aspects of Konoha could be improved, which was mostly just them trying to deepen their pockets. On the rare occasion there was a genuinely good idea, but not with this batch of self-serving civilians. Seeing a chance to rid the council chambers of the civilians, the Hokage cleared his throat, gaining the attention of most of the council. Thank you for that most enlightening presentation on how we may act to help Konoha, but now that you have said your piece, I am afraid I must ask you to leave, so that we may discuss shinobi business. The Yellow Flash asked in the most polite tone that he could muster, getting a clear nod from Kushina, who sat behind him because of Naruto occupying the Uzumaki seat of the council. All of the civilians muttered their discontent, but in the end they all left the room without incident. Is it just me? Or does it seem like those civilians are getting more annoying and taking up more time with each meeting? Was the question posed by the Inuzuka clan head, Tsum, as she tried to shake away the sleepiness that had fallen over her during the time taken up by the long-winded civilians. Don't you think you are being a little harsh on them, Tsum? I mean, they are just trying to better the village. Kind of, Asuma said, trying to come to their defense. The younger Sarutobi was now the acting Sarutobi clan head because of the third stepping down in an effort to remove himself from the public eye and fall into a quiet retirement after so many decades in active service. Kushina, who agreed with her friend Tsum, shook her head with a small smirk, since it was clear who the newbie was in the council room, and Asuma was displaying all the signs of that. You can only say that because this is the second meeting you have attended. Give it time and your nerves will wither too, Asuma. Minato, who wanted to move on with the meeting's agenda, sent Kushina a look telling her to quiet down, earning a pout from his wife. Civilians aside, I received a report from Jiraiya that Suna has shown no sign of acting out of what has become standard since before we took the Fuma mission. This piece of information leads me to believe that it was not Suna who leaked the information of our operation to the Fuma. Minato said happily as his eyes surveyed the room for reactions, only spending a moment longer on Danzo than others. Well, that is good news. It would be pretty bad if we lost our ties with Suna, especially considering tensions with us and Taki are high right now thanks to the incident with the Nanabai Jinchuriki. Inoichi spoke up with a small frown as he looked to Naruto, who was at the other side of the table. If Naruto saw his gaze, he didn't acknowledge it, sitting there with his eyes closed, but making it clear that he was awake. My thoughts exactly, Inoichi. It is good that we can manage to hold onto an ally in such uncertain times. Now then, on to the next piece of information. It seems that Kumo has come to us with a request. A frown made its way on his face as Minato thought about the shaky history between the village hidden in the clouds and the village hidden in the leaves. Just like that, everyone was alert. Even Danzo, whose lone eye narrowed. What is it that they are asking of us, Hokage-sama? Shibi asked from his seat, acting in favor of the Aburame. The only real sign of interest coming from the controlled man was the slight lean forward he was unconsciously doing. There were a couple nods around the table, making it clear that others were wondering the same thing. They have asked for an alliance between our two villages. Minato said calmly as he watched a certain level of surprise or shock play out on most of the counselors' faces. He too was blown away by the offer from the very militaristic village from the Kaminari no Kuni because it seemed so out of character. Everyone knew that Kumo was the kind of village that would have rather walked over your body than helped you out, so naturally there were some suspicions. Hamura looked to his Kage from behind his pair of glasses and frowned, which only served to accentuate the frowns that were etched into his forehead from years of service and stress. Folding his arms over his chest, giving the impression he was not very pleased, even if he had no right to judge a Kage as a counselor. Why are we only finding out about this right now of all times, Hokage-sama? Sighing, the blonde once again questioned himself as to why he let the advisors from the last regime remain in their seats of influence. The reason for that, advisor, was because I only received the scroll with the details on this proposition 10 minutes before this meeting was scheduled to begin. Minato said, sending a small glare towards the elderly man, making him lose some of that false confidence he had built up and shrink back with a nod. It's not like it matters what the scroll says. Knowing Kumo, it is probably just a cover for some attempt to kidnap one of our shinobi like in the past. The red-haired wife of the Hokage spoke venomously, remembering the time Kumo had tried to kidnap her. This sentiment was shared by Hayashi because the last time it was his daughter they had tried to kidnap for her Byakugan, and that cost him his twin brother. How exactly do they want to confirm this treaty? I assume that it is a complete treaty requiring both trading and military assistance should conflict arise, considering the times we live in. Shikaku asked his question before correctly assessing what kind of treaty was offered based off of rational thought and speculation, getting Minato to send him an impressed smirk because his brain power never ceased to amaze the young Hokage. That is the part that has me concerned. Kumo is asking for an engagement to make sure that we don't go back on the agreement if something should happen. Minato found himself to be frowning once again as he laced his fingers in front of his face. Hearing that brought frowns to most of the council, as well as they thought about different things from possible candidates to backlash should they reject it. There is more. They have requested a certain person for the bride they have offered. They want you, Naruto. Minato finished, leaving the room so silent a pin could be heard if it was dropped. Then, just like a broken floodgate, a number of side conversations begin between individual counselors that filled the room. Minato ignored all of this in favor at looking to Naruto, who showed no visible reaction and in fact was sitting back in his chair as stoic as ever, or maybe even more detached. It was Mikoto who was the first person to speak to the entirety of the chamber. This must be another one of Kumo's ploys to take one of our dojutsu for their own. We all know how desperate they are to supplement their forces with the bloodlines of other countries. It has to be a trap to get Naruto-kun's Sharingan. Mikoto tried to reason, wanting to protect the boy she saw as her own son from the dastardly clutches of another country's thirst for power. She would not let him turn out like her friend Hizashi, who was a scapegoat to Kumo's ambition. Normally I would agree with you, Mikoto, but it is who they propose to be his wife that has me thinking that this might be a genuine. The person named to be wed with Naruto is the Samui girl that took part in the Chunin exams. She herself is in possession of the bloodline limit known as the Storm Release, one of only 2 people who possess it in Kumo. Minato said, catching the attention of Danzo, since that was quite the rare bloodline, and while not as powerful as the Sharingan, it was something worth noting. I can understand why they would like to have your son as their choice, but surely they could accept Sasuke. He too has the Sharingan. Koharu said with a scowl on her face, since she still didn't like the Uzumaki clan head. He was just too disrespectful for her liking and needed to be more compliant. No, Kumo has made it plenty clear that they will only accept Naruto as a potential groom. It seems that his performance against the Kazekage's son and his Biju had left an impression with the Raikage and his council. Minato explained Kumo's rationale, looking at the elderly woman, then back to his son, who had yet to say anything, which had him start to worry. Even if the Storm Release is obscure and powerful, it still isn't in a league with the Sharingan. I say that we reject the offer. Kushina said stubbornly as she acted like the mother she was to Naruto, but if you were going to ask Naruto, he would say she was acting out of place and was by no means his mother. Kushina, not only is Naruto a Chunin of this village, he is also the Uzumaki clan head and has to make his own decisions. The disapproval of her husband did nothing to deter the scoff she verbalized, since she still wanted nothing to do with whatever Kumo had planned for her son. It just struck too close to home for the female Uzumaki. Shaking his head slightly, Minato turned back to his son. What do you have to say, Naruto? That was when every set of eyes in the room made their way to Naruto's seat, where he was still sitting motionless with his eyes closed. If Naruto felt any unease with all of those eyes on him, he did well to hide it under a blank facade. He did try his best to not show how much he disliked the idea, but he remembered something that Hiruzen had told him once when the two were having tea at his home. Listen here, Naruto-kun, because I have some advice for you should you ever become Hokage. A Hokage sometimes must do something that he'd rather not, so he can keep the village and its future safe from those who would do it harm. Accepting this will bring us a new ally in Kumo, and this will leave us a safety net should things fall through with Suna. If I accept this, then I can ensure that the village will be even safer than it would if I am to say no. If a token marriage is what it takes to keep the future of Konoha safe from jealous adversaries of the past, then that is a price I am willing to pay. With that in mind, you can inform the Raikage that I will accept this offer. To punctuate his statement, Naruto opened his eyes, showing off his fully matured Sharingan. As much as he tries to not show it, he really doesn't want to do it, but he will because it means that Konoha will be better off should the worst happen. The kid is something else. Asuma thought with a smile around his unlit cigarette and a newfound respect for Naruto as he was reminded of the same statement that Naruto was when he looked at the young Chunin. Naruto, you don't have to do this. There has to be another way to get this treaty signed. Mikoto said heatedly from her seat next to Naruto, not being able to comprehend how he could just sell his happiness like that for a village he hated. She just didn't know that Naruto was doing this for the future of the village. The kids. No, Mikoto, I need to do this. It is the only way that we can for sure maintain at least one ally in case Suna proves to be a traitor. It is my duty as a shinobi of this village. Naruto tried to assure his pseudo-mother with a serene smile that had her frowning sadly, while cursing his noble nature that she was sure came from his Uzumaki genetics. When am I expected to be married to Samui? Naruto asked, wanting to gauge how much time he had left to himself before things changed. Minato smiled at his son, proud that he would do something so selfless for a village that had been less than kind to him, and not even 4 months ago had a stadium full of people calling for his execution on the Chunin exams field. That is where I have some good news. It seems that the Hokage wants to wait for about 3.5 years because you are only 13 and Samui 14. He thinks that you both need time to grow as people, so until then you are to be engaged. Naruto sighed and nodded. That was indeed a silver lining, if you will, in this whole political mess that he was pushed into. With that, Minato called an end to the meeting, but Naruto immediately left to go think on his new fiancée. This left those who wanted to talk to him about what just happened frowning in disappointment. I'm what? Samui shouted in shock, which was completely unexpected to anyone who had even heard about the girl and her Ice Queen persona. The Busta Blonde was just informed that she was to be married off to a shinobi of another village, and she reacted like any woman with a mind would have. She got angry. I did not appear to be bothered by the outburst, though he was slightly surprised to see the usually controlled Kunoichi react so aggressively. Staring at her blankly, I tried to scare her back to a more talk-able state, but Samui was so flustered that she was not paying attention. Growing irritated easily, it could easily be stated that the fourth lightning shadow was not the most patient person to live. Enough, Chunin! I barked out, his hands slamming down on his desk, knocking over a stack of papers that his assistant had brought in a while ago. Samui, who suddenly became more aware of who she was in the presence of, straightened out and controlled herself from lashing out anymore. As I was saying, you have been engaged to a shinobi from the Hidden Leaf until you will be married in 3 years' time. Give or take a few months. I said with his usual serious expression on his face, ignoring the look of confusion on his subordinate's face. He only called her here to let her know what was going to happen to her, so she wouldn't be completely blindsided. May I ask who it is and why Hokage-sama? Samui asked in hopes of trying to figure out what was going on, while she silently hoped that she was not engaged to Sasuke Uchiha, who she had found out during the exams that he was just a cocky fool who had both an inferiority and superiority complex. That would be like hell on earth for the storm release user. Opening up his desk, the hulking Hokage sent a small folder towards Samui with a grunt which she caught easily. Yes, the boy's name is Naruto Uzumaki or Uchiha. I don't really care what he calls himself, I said rather dismissively as Samui opened up the folder and read the information that was gathered on her fiancé. As for why, just know that everything starts with the first step, and it is your duty as a kunoichi of Kimogakure. You will not fail. Do you understand? Nodding absently, Samui stepped out of her Kage's office, and once the door closed, she slumped against the wall and let out a tired sigh that quickly escaped from her lips. The blonde kunoichi looked down at Naruto's picture with her usual stoicism. At least Naruto-san is someone who has shown he doesn't lord his strength over others, and he seems cool enough. And most important, he will respect my strength. Could be worst. With that, Samui left to her home carrying the folder with the information on her fiancé. Somewhere in Hai no Kuni, Kakashi and his team continued their slow trek through the woods of the Land of Fire, each lost in their own thoughts. Except for the silver-haired Jounin, he was reading his favorite Ika novel written by a certain white-hair pervert that all women loathed. Kakashi was glad to not have to hear any arguments between his three subordinates. It was no secret that Sakura still had major crush on the team's Uchiha, but at least she had grown at a kunoichi thanks to Tsunade's strict tutelage. Sasuke was still grasping on to those inferiority and superiority complexes of his that had only grown since the beatdown that Naruto laid on him, where he systematically destroyed Sasuke in all he claimed to be best at. Sasuke still felt the need and right to badmouth Naruto about how he was simply lucky, and that he would give the villagers what they wanted, and that was Naruto's execution. This had earned him disturbed looks from both Sakura and Kakashi, and a furious scowl from Naomi. It was just not possible for the single-handed mauling Naruto laid upon him, just like when Itachi left on that night. It was a reminder of his weakness, and that was something he never wanted to relive. Just thinking about it left the raven-haired shinobi clutching at his fists in a way to force out those dark thoughts. Maybe if he was stronger he could have stopped Itachi that night, and the Uchiha would finally get the respect they deserved. Not once had an Uchiha been put for the seat of Hokage. As a matter of fact, they were shunned from it. If the clan was alive, he was certain they could rule the village. Then they could kill that false Uchiha, Naruto, and he could laugh at the boy's grave, but no. None of that would happen, all because of his traitorous elder brother. Sasuke's eyes went red with his Sharingan at the thoughts of hatred flowing through his veins. If I want to be able to kill Itachi, then first I need to kill Naruto and rip his false eyes right out of his head. Sasuke mumbled, smirking a bit as he imagined the look of shock on Naruto's face when he finally would manage to end his desperate existence, letting out the very Uchiha patented H and snort as he continued to walk forward. Only someone had overheard what the revenge-driven boy said. "You better watch your tongue, Uchiha. Nisen already kicked your ass once, and he can and would do it 100 more times," Naomi said confidentially, wearing a challenging smirk of her own. Ever since she and Naruto had trained, she had felt closer to her brother than ever before, and that meant she felt the need to defend his name. She knew Naruto could handle himself, but he wasn't here, so she felt that the privilege fell to her to put the Uchiha in his place. Sasuke rounded on the red-headed daughter of the Hokage with his Sharingan already glaring bloody murder at the smirking kunoichi. His lips turned down into an angry snarl at the mention of the teen we was going to kill, that he promised to himself. "Don't you dare say the name of that worthless fake of an Uchiha," Sasuke said, losing his temper so quickly thanks to the thoughts bubbling under the surface. She had him hooked at Naomi knew it, and she never thought it would feel so satisfying to be able to push someone like this. Sure, she had seen Naruto do it, but it was another thing entirely to be the one manipulating someone. Placing her hands on her hips, Naomi decided to see how far she could humiliate the emotionally unstable shinobi. "Oh, and if Nisan is a fake Uchiha, what does that make you, seeing as how he smacked you around in front of the world?" Naomi asked with a cheeky smirk, making Sasuke once again go back to his first and only fight of the Chunin exams. "I told you to shut your mouth. If you don't shut up, I am going to kill you before I kill the Hokage's bastard son." Sasuke growled, his Sharingan spinning dangerously at Naomi, whose hair shadowed her eyes. Unseen to anyone, Sasuke's curse mark pulsed a light purple, feeding his negative emotions before fading back to its normal black color. "Sasuke-kun, what are you saying?" the pink-haired kunoichi of the team asked in a sad whisper that went unheard by the Uchiha Avenger. Sakura knew Sasuke wasn't the nicest or most sensitive of guys, but he would never outright promise to kill someone unless it was his older brother. This just wasn't like him to voice his dark thoughts, and it scared the daughter of two civilians. Naomi stood there silently with her hair covering her eyes, making Sasuke think that she was going to back down. That was until she looked up. In an instant, her violet eyes went to the violent crimson of the Kyuubi, and her hair started to separate into 9 tendrils that started to sway ominously. Sasuke subconsciously took a step away from what seemed to be the Kyuubi in a young woman's form. "You can say all you want about me and the others in my family, Uchiha. You can even threaten my life. I can handle that, but when you threaten and completely insult my brother is when I can't take anymore." By the end of her threat, Naomi's voice was no longer her own, but it was laced with the venom and anger that distorted it to sound like a young demon's. The amount of killing intent she was releasing was enough to get Sasuke's knees to wobble and Sakura to fall to the ground unconscious. Even Kakashi had a bead of sweat coming down his forehead as the intent to kill Sasuke got even thicker. The silver-haired Cyclops knew that he had to intervene before Naomi lost control and accidentally killed Sasuke. What Kakashi didn't know was that if he died, it would be an accident. Appearing between the two, Kakashi turned to face Sasuke, so he didn't put his own feet in the grave that he was digging. Kakashi put his hands on Sasuke's shoulders, getting the boy to lock gazes with him. Sasuke takes Sakura and continue on this path. Even though Kakashi spoke softly, it was still clearly an order. Sasuke looked to the Jounin for a moment before grunting and rudely breaking Kakashi's contact. Stomping over to Sakura, he slung her over his shoulder and marched off down the path. Sighing in relief, Kakashi turned around to face Naomi, whose hair returned back to normal, but her eyes were still that dangerous glint of red. The silver-haired former ANBU approached the angry Chunin Jinchuriki with caution in case she called upon that chakra. "Naomi, you need to calm down before you lose control," Kakashi said, urgently, hoping to stop his sensei's daughter from doing something she would regret and get him thrown out active duty for the foreseeable future. Red eyes flickered up to meet the single, weary eye of the scarecrow, where they stared up defiantly for a few moments before Naomi nodded. Looking at her sensei, Naomi nodded with a small smile that shifted back to a frown as she watched Sasuke walk away. "If the Uchiha runs his mouth like that again, sensei, I will pound him into the ground for my Nisan." With her proclamation said, Naomi marched past Kakashi reluctantly to follow after her team to complete the mission, leaving Kakashi frowning. "I just hope this team can get through this mission without the two coming to blows." Once again, Kakashi used a shunshin to appear in front of his young team of Konoha shinobi, who he had ordered to wait for him to return. He was pleased to find that they weren't fighting each other but rather divided, he could say. Sakura, who was sitting near Sasuke, was trying to hide the small glances she was taking at her two teammates. Sasuke was sitting there, his eyes closed and looking generally annoyed with everything. Then there was Naomi, who must have noticed his presence because she was looking at him expectantly. Just like her mother, patience was not a virtue she possessed. "I went ahead and did some scouting on the camp that our target has went ahead and set up, and there won't be all that difficult. There was a B rank missing Nin and a rather small group of bandits that you will deal with. Time to head out. Let's go," Kakashi said, pulling out his famous orange novel to pass the time as they started to walk. It wasn't a long walk. It was only a few minutes before they reached the gates of the small outpost. It was clear that the walls weren't there because of arrogance or anything in that vein, but rather necessity. The walls showed claw marks from some sort of wildlife that had apparently taken interest in what the people in the area were doing and wanted to investigate. That was the purpose of the walls, safety, not making a statement but a difference. Seeing the familiar defensive structure, Kakashi put away his book and motioned for the two genin and Chunin to stop with his gloved hand. Once the silver-haired shinobi heard the small sounds that came with his team's footsteps coming to an end, he turned around to give out his orders. "Okay, now that we are here, I want you three to listen and carefully. I have already concluded that there is only one shinobi in the camp and I will be dealing with the nuke Nin. Every other person in the camp is a bandit, so I will leave the decision whether you leave them unconscious or dead up to you. Sasuke, I want you to take the left side of the outpost and Naomi the right." Kakashi said, getting two quick nods, although Sasuke was smirking, focusing his one eye on Sakura, who he had yet to address, which made her both curious and a little upset that he hadn't asked her to help. She had trained much harder than ever before in her life, so she wouldn't be so useless. "Sakura, you are the team's only medic, so it is vital you don't get injured. I want you to stay posted here and watch in case more enemies show up, and this way you can alert the rest of us," Kakashi said with an eye smile, serving to boost the young Kunoichi's confidence, something he would try to do as often as he could. "Now that all three of you know what you have to do, go and do it," Kakashi said before walking towards the center of the camp, allowing the two combatants of his team to vanish in their own variants of the body flicker technique. The famed copy Nin calmly made his way towards the larger tent set up in the very center of the area as the panicked screams made their way through the camp, no doubt thanks to his two students. "I don't think I should waste time here with Sasuke and Naomi at odds like they are." Pulling down the face mask that he used to conceal his own Sharingan, Kakashi quickly flashed a few signs ending on that of the tiger. Fire release, grand fireball. Through the fabric of his face mask came a brilliant ball of super hot flames that soared through the air towards the tent. The silver-haired Jounin's nose twitched slightly when the scent of burning fabric invaded his senses. A sigh made its way from Kakashi's lips as he turned around slowly to find a man with sandy brown hair facing him. The man's eyes set in a superior stare. "What is it, Sharingan no Kakashi? Did you think that you had burned me alive?" The man was seen to be wearing a scratched-out IWA headband. He asked his question feeling smug since he would have the chance to defeat the fabled Konoha Jounin. It would be a huge reputation boost for him and his little following. No, it isn't anything like that at all. I knew you survived, but I was hoping that you had enough common courtesy to die in a blaze of glory, if you will. Kakashi said, looking at the man lazily as the Iwagakure missing nin smirked even wider, taking the Cyclops nin's words different from what they were meant to be taken as if the unnamed shinobi was privileged to a joke no one else was. He began to laugh boisterously, even going so far as to shake his head. Taking a few deep breaths, the former IWA shinobi turned back to Kakashi. Of course it would take more than a little fire to kill me, Kakashi. I was about to become a jounin myself before I left that moronic village. But it's funny that you should mention glory because it will be all mine when I get the head from your shoulders. You want to hear something funny? Some no-name chunin thinks that he can take my head in a one-on-one fight. Doesn't that just make you want to chuckle? Kakashi asked sarcastically, but all he got was a boulder flying towards him. Looks like he doesn't want to trade words anymore. Kakashi easily weaved out of the boulder's flight pattern, pulling a kunai out of the holster on his hip. Appearing behind his opponent, Kakashi drove the blade of his kunai through the back of the IWA nuke nin's neck. The man's body crumbled into a liquid mess of mud, showing it was only a Tsuchi Bunshin. You think that just because your name has some weight behind it that you are invincible. I don't know about Konoha, but where I come from that is called arrogance, Kakashi. The man spoke as his body came out of the ground without a scratch on his body, but there still was a superior smirk. Naomi stood her ground, silently counting the number of thugs that had taken the space opposite of her. Bringing her hand down, Naomi counted 15 simple thugs, only 10 or so were armed with a weapon. In short, she knew they were no match for a chunin like her, much less a Jinchuriki. The redhead couldn't help but be disappointed that her sensei took the only shinobi in the group, but orders were orders. Man, I can't wait till I get to lead a team, then I will be able to stick others with nuisances like bandits. Damn you, sensei. Of course the bandits, who were lulled to be more confident than they should be because of their numbers, mistook Naomi's stark disinterest for fear, fitting the young girl she was. The man standing at the front of the group smirked, showing a few missing teeth. The rest of the men started to laugh, believing Naomi to be just another little girl pretending to be a ninja. Haha, looks like they sent a little girl to deal with us, boys. Oh, what a riot. The man said, grinning once he heard the group behind laugh even harder, boosting his ego. Naomi watched on, clearly unimpressed, as all of their laughter melded together into one ugly, unpleasant sound that hurt the annoyed young kunoichi's ears. As they continued to laugh, Naomi grew certain they just liked hearing the sounds of their own voices. That guy calling them boys certainly fits how they act. All he did was call me a girl, and they act like they were hit with some kind of laughing gas. Strangely enough, Naomi was aware that when she thought of a man and what she thought they should be, it wasn't her father that came to mind, but her brother. You know, in a few years you would have been quite the looker, girly. I would have loved to have some fun with you, but I am not into children, so that means you're dead. Ha ha. The man's eyes flashed for a moment with lust, no doubt imagining an older, more matured Naomi for his lecherous thoughts. Then, just like a pack of hyenas, his laughter became infectious, and the rest of the brigade of bandits started to laugh again until their lungs started to burn with the need for oxygen. It was clear they still thought of the Jinchuriki as nothing more than a girl playing shinobi. Naomi felt an extremely disgusted shiver enter her body when she saw the look in the eyes of the man who was the brash speaker of the group. It was extremely discomforting to know that a person of his character was thinking about her like that, but thankfully she had the abilities to make sure they wouldn't be thinking that for much longer. Raising her hands to face the laughing mass of stupidity, Naomi began to call on her chakra. Wind release. Dancing blades. Forming under her palms were two visible crescent blades of wind that had another pair of blades lined up behind them. With a slight outward pulse of her chakra, the four blades went slashing through the air, slamming into the chests of four unsuspecting thugs. The sharpened wind leaving deep enough gashes that they started to bleed before they went colliding with the tents that were set up. The 15 thugs were now 11 and suddenly had nothing else to laugh at. The sound of their stunned silence brought a content smirk to the face of the Namikaze heiress. The smirk only felt 100 times better because they thought she was some weak girl who they could slaughter and be done with. Oh, how wrong they were. What, she got 4 of 'em with one ninja technique thingy. She's like the boss. What do we do? There were a number consenting murmurs from the back of the group as those in the rear were able to look back to see that their allies still had yet to recover from that last ninjutsu attack. They may have felt confident before, but reality just slapped them in the face and hard, letting them know just what they were up against. The man at the head of the small group could feel that control of the group was slowly slipping through his fingers, and he knew he needed to do something. This little brat is nothing like the boss, just look at her. She is just a weak girl who got lucky with that strike. Now let's kill her. Let it be known that charisma was something anyone could have as long as they knew their audience, something this man had a firm grasp of. The redhead watched on surprised as the men suddenly found a grasp on their will to fight and grabbed their weapons, charging at her position. To a civilian or another common bandit, the sight would have been intimidating, but to a shinobi it was just fools rushing to be defeated. Each of the men raised their weapons, some were sharp blades, while others were meant to deal blunt force trauma. Of course, Naomi had no intention to let this happen, responded by performing her hand signs that would scatter them like leaves in the wind. Naomi smirked when the combined war cry of the thugs was unleashed, because soon it would be a cry of shock. Wind release, great breakthrough. With her fierce cry came a wall of wind that rushed past her shoulder towards the rushing bandits, which would set up a very painful collision between wind and flesh and bone. The men cried out in shock when the strong gale slammed into them, knocking them into the air and disarming them at the same time. The wind continued on, throwing the men through tents and into the wooden walls built all around the encampment. The sound of dull thuds was like music to the ears of the container of the Kyuubi's in Chakra, who was more than happy to deal some retribution out to the pigs of men these bandits were. A mangled groan of pain caught Naomi's attention, which allowed her to find the spokesperson of the group laying on his back, his arms struggling to support his limp frame. A small smirk crossed her lips as a glowing ball of spiraling chakra began to form in her open hand. Appearing above the man holding one of her father's signature jutsu, Naomi thrust her hand down into his gut. Rasengan. The man's beady eyes widened in pain as Naomi continued to drive the Rasengan deeper into his gut, increasing the pain exponentially. Luckily for the bandit, Naomi stopped before the attack could kill the man and created 15 shadow clones that all looked at her with the same satisfied smirk she was wearing. Dig holes into the ground and put them in them so that only their heads are sticking out of the ground. This way it is up to chance if they live or not, Naomi said with a grin. Sasuke delivered a quick kick to the back of the last thug's head, knocking him completely out, just like the other garbage he had disposed of in the area. All in all, the Uchiha was left with an unsatisfied feeling in his gut, much like Naomi. He wanted to get stronger, and it was clear to his eyes that these fools were not going to make him stronger. This is completely ridiculous. Why am I wasting my time dealing with idiots who can't even hold a weapon correctly when I could be training to kill those two? Sasuke growled in the recesses of his mind as images of Itachi and to a lesser extent Naruto came to the forefront of his mind. He was about to act on that rage by sending a fireball the way of the unconscious bandits, but a set of purposefully loud footsteps brought his attention to the body of another man who just had a different aura about him. It was clear that he was not another simple bandit, which made Sasuke grin. Oh, I remember those eyes. The eyes of the cursed clan of our home, but you're still just a kid, so I probably shouldn't get my hopes up, the man said, running his hand through his spiky black locks. His eyes were the same shade of black, and Sasuke could see the scratched-out hidden leaf headband around his left bicep with a leaf flack covering his upper body. Sasuke also took note of the red and black bow staff that was fastened to his back, running vertically. Sasuke's cursed eyes gleamed dangerously before the three black tomo in each of his eyes rotated at the prospect of battling with another shinobi. It was even better knowing this was a shinobi from his village that couldn't cut it. He was about to learn of the power of the Uchiha. You are from Konoha, then you should know how feared that the Uchiha clan is and about our power. I will enjoy killing you like the village should have done before you could run like a dog with its tail between its legs. Fitting for a worthless shinobi like yourself. Fire release. Grand fireball. The former Konoha shinobi watched as the fireball got closer with each second, but not before he used his own jutsu in accordance to the Uchiha strike. Water release. Spiraling water bullet. From the man's mouth came a spherical mass of water where it was clearly visible that a small riptide was being built underneath. A mass of water meeting the ball of burning fire, creating the predictable blanket of mist that showered the space. It wasn't very long before a strong wind cleared away the mist, showing that neither shinobi was scathed. Ah, the fire you produce reminds me of those who were just as famous for their prowess with fire. It reminds me of those who took everything from me. You will be the unlucky one who will have to deal with the anger of my revenge. The man said, baring his teeth as he grabbed his staff and twirled it around skillfully. Sasuke, who was familiar with the desire for revenge, could hear the disdain in his opponent's voice and snarled. There was no way he would die to a no-name shinobi who couldn't cut it as a Konoha shinobi. Sasuke, who wasn't going to sit there and become someone's kill, dropped into his taijutsu stance, the interceptor fist. I don't know what you are talking about, but you are delusional if you think you can kill an Uchiha. I suppose I can tell you my story before you die. My name is Orion Sarutobi. You see, when the third Hokage tried to become the clan head, my father opposed him, believing his ideals would put our clan beneath those like the Uchiha and Hyuga. My father, however, did not have the kind of political backing that Hiruzen did, and ultimately he lost, but it doesn't end there. No, Hiruzen thought that my father's presence would only hinder relationship growth between the clans, so he sent him on a suicidal mission with his power as the Hokage. My father was too proud of a man to decline such a mission and believe himself to live as a coward. Orion started capturing Sasuke's attention, never knowing this side of the welcoming old man he had met a number of times. Now we fast forward a number of years to where I started to gain momentum in the village, but there was a caveat. Everyone in the clan ostracized me for being my father's son and often tried to incriminate me, and eventually they found what they needed. They realized that I couldn't perform a fire jutsu, something the Sarutobi clan prides itself on being able to do, and soon they started to form a plan to humiliate me and convince the clan head, Hiruzen, that I needed to be kicked from the clan. Knowing this, I decided to strike first. Orion's lips twisted into a dark, pleased grin that had latently resounded with Sasuke's curse mark, making it glow lightly. As you may or may not know, the old Sarutobi fathered 2 sons. Asuma became a ninja guardian, but have you ever heard of his first son? Orion slammed the butt of his staff into the ground, and Sasuke shook his head no. There is a reason for that, of course. You see, we both went to the Jounin exams on the same year. We both performed exceptionally, that I will admit, but the judges saw it differently. Even though we performed on equal footing, he was chosen and I was not, clearly a political move. I was furious, so I thought of not only my revenge but my father's as well. Sasuke felt himself getting pulled more into this unknown story like it was an elaborate, intricate genjutsu. It was not even 2 nights later that I found the chance to get my revenge on Hiruzen's immediate family. I was on my way home from guard duty when I heard a familiar voice coming from one of the local bars. It was Hiruzen's eldest son, and he was drunk celebrating his promotion. Seizing my chance, I offered to help him home, which he accepted, thinking we were friends. I had him and I knew it, so I took him to a dark alley which confused him even in a drunken state. Before he could even ask his question, my kunai found its way through his throat, completely leaving a hole where an Adam's apple should be. He was dead, and I took away from Hiruzen just like he had taken from me. The man started to laugh manically, which made Sasuke nervous because this Orion was clearly insane, and not even Sasuke was that far gone. Curse mark and all. You are insane. I don't care that your family is weak, besides they will always be weak when compared to the power of the Uchiha. Sasuke shouted as he rushed in towards Orion, his Sharingan ready to read any body movement. Seeing that he wasn't moving, Sasuke decided to strike with his fist, but in a blur Orion blocked the straight right with the sturdy shaft of his bow staff, making the raven-haired genin flinch in pain. Not ready to be stopped by a simple stick, as Sasuke saw it, he got ready to twist his body to deal another blow, but Orion was faster again. Swirling his staff, Orion drove his sturdy wood deeply into the stomach of the younger shinobi, knocking the spit out of his mouth. Using his superior strength, Orion lifted Sasuke with the length of his weapon before slamming the teen back into the ground, knocking the breath out of Sasuke. Taking joy in Sasuke's groans and panting, Orion started to walk towards where the young genin was put in a small crater. It was then that his progress was stopped by a hail of kunai that had explosive tags that started to sizzle, which Orion immediately noticed and heard. Clever little brat. Boom. Sasuke propped himself up with his arms, looking at the cloud of smoke with a smirk, not thinking that Orion would be capable of defending himself before the notes went off. Eventually the smoke drifted off, showing the only thing there looked like the remnants of an earth wall. Sasuke, learning from past battles, scanned the area around him for his adversary, turning at the last moment. He acted quickly, deflecting the shuriken tossed at him with his kunai. Stubborn rodent should have just stayed dead. That was a nice trick you played there. Some of those tags were just pieces of paper and made me think that they were all live notes. Not bad at all. Orion complimented the young Uchiha, patting down the spots on his sleeves that had deep scorch marks and soot on the fabric. A slight growl made its way from Sasuke's lips as he started to do hand signs of his own at the pace of a low chunin, which amused the wayward Sarutobi. Rearing the top of his body back, Sasuke exhaled a mouth full of flames. Fire release. Dragon Flame Bomb. The fiery head of the dragon expanded once it hit the oxygen, using it to feed and grow as it traveled towards Orion, who looked the least bit concerned. The man's sigh was not heard because at the same time the dragon's maw roared, letting out a few embers from its mouth. Slamming the staff back into the ground, the Nukenin called out his next move in response to Sasuke's jutsu. Water release. Water encampment wall. Orion waited until he heard the hiss on the other side of his wall die before he dropped his shield. Seeing the Manyon while in the middle of battle feed Sasuke's anger, making it at least triple at how he was brushed away like some kind of civilian. The curse mark slowly started to spread down the side of his neck and under the collar of his black Uchiha clan, where, if you have anything better than that Uchiha, I suggest you use it before you die. Orion said, suggesting the genin to do his best lest he die with regret. You are going to regret asking an Uchiha to show you their full power, because it will be the last thing that you will see in your pathetic life. During his rage-filled cry, Sasuke had performed the necessary actions to perform the legendary Chidori. The sounds of chirping brought a smirk to the B-ranked missing nin. He would admit Sasuke was good, possibly mid-chunin material, but he was a jounin in all but name. Before Sasuke had even rushed forward, Orion was already starting his hand signs. Sasuke was following the path of attack his Sharingan laid out for him, so that his attack could go through the heart of Orion. A smirk made its way onto his face as he made the last 3 steps towards Orion, who just put his hands in the dirt. Earth release. Swamp of the underworld. Sasuke's eyes widened when he found that he couldn't move his legs at all, and quickly looked down, finding his legs knee-deep in a thick mud. Without really thinking, Sasuke thrust his hand down into the mud, knowing that lightning was strong against earth. The plan was to free himself, then strike Orion with a second Chidori, killing him and restoring his pride. Then, much to Sasuke's shock, his hand was simply absorbed into the mud, leaving him in an even more compromised situation now that he lost his dominant hand. What? Lightning is supposed to be stronger than earth. Normally that would be true if this was a smaller area. The wide range of my jutsu disperses your current throughout the ground, making it much weaker than it would be under normal circumstances. Taking a few steps so he was in front of Sasuke, the man proceeded to place his hands in the ground, ignoring the fearful look on the face of the Konoha genin. Because the Sharingan shinobi was so afraid of what appeared to be his death, he missed the slight widening of Orion's eyes as he sensed something behind, but knew he was already too far into his jutsu to do something. I got too distracted playing with the Uchiha that I let my guard down, and now I am going to pay for it. Whoever that is chose their time to strike magnificently. Orion thought highly of the person behind him, waiting for the payment of his negligence. Wind release. Gauntlets of Fujin. Sasuke's eyes widened when he recognized the voice that belonged to Naomi, as she appeared behind the man in a shunshin. Thrusting her arm into the man's gut, Naomi's wind-covered fist and forearm easily cut through the man's stomach, making him lurch forward. Coughing up blood, Orion's black eyes immediately dimmed as he faded out of consciousness. The young Jinchuriki pulled her arm out of the man's stomach, the wind keeping the blood from staining her clothing. Uzumaki emblazoned Chunin flak, and without the arm through his gut, the man fell onto his stomach. Stepping around the unconscious, bleeding Sarutobi, the redhead made her way to the still immobilized Sasuke. Grabbing him by the elbow, she used some of her chakra to yank him out of the mud cask that had him held firmly. Falling onto his rear, Sasuke grunted and his Sharingan faded, letting Naomi see the black eyes that were glaring at her. What was that technique, and why couldn't I copy it? Sasuke demanded, not even thanking Naomi for helping him out of his tough situation. Please, like Nisan would make a jutsu that someone like you could so easily copy. Even if my jutsu is incomplete, you still won't be copying it, Uchiha. Naomi said, literally looking down at the boy with a stern frown as she watched the curse marks crawl closer towards his eyes. She knew he was unstable, but she still wondered what he was thinking right now. I refuse to be saved by his jutsu and then be looked down on by the person using it. Sasuke growled, his eyes flashing back into the Sharingan as he tried to fire back up a Chidori, not seeing anything but red and the need to see blood at the end of his hand. Naomi jumped back and called on her gauntlets of Fujin, not just planning on lying down and dying for the idiot. However, before the two could come to blows, Kakashi appeared behind Sasuke and knocked him out, stopping the spread of the curse mark. Kakashi looked down sadly at the one student that reminded him so much of himself and sighed. Picking up the silver-haired Jounin looked to Naomi, who dropped back to a neutral stance. Let's go. Naruto appeared inside of the Hokage's office within the winds of a wind, Shunshin, his cool blue eyes set on the man behind the desk expectantly. Minato kept his sigh to himself as he noticed that Naruto had become much cooler towards he and Kushina as of late. He shook his head slightly because now was not the time for personal matters. There was business to attend to. Naruto, I am glad that you are here because I have a mission that requires you immediate attention. Minato's voice carried no small amount of relief but also a tone of seriousness underneath that relief. The blonde Hokage almost expected an answer to come from his son until he realized just who it was that he was speaking to. Naruto never answered an open-ended statement like that unless it was needed. Naruto stood there, his patience growing thin with the man before him who had just interrupted something rather important to Naruto for this meeting. Then just when he was ready to really look into things, bang, there was a summons from the mighty yellow flash. This better be worth it, or I am just going to walk out of that door and refuse the mission. A couple of hours ago, I sent the Chunin Shikamaru Nara on a mission with a handful of genin to recover Sasuke Uchiha, who had voluntarily left the village to join Orochimaru according to his teammate Sakura Haruno. With that being said, I want you to be their backup until I can get a Jounin who can be sent out there as additional support. Minato said with a deep frown, creating a wrinkle on his forehead. Internally, the blonde wondered just how all of his capable Jounin could be busy at the same time and decided once this was all over, the system needed some reorganization. Naruto stood there absorbing the words of the fourth fire shadow with his eyes closed and his thoughts swarming. He knew it was only a matter of time that the curse mark corrupted Sasuke's weak will. The Avenger was determined to do the wrong things in life, and his resolve could only be so much. I never have and probably never will like Sasuke, but I owe it to Mikoto and Itachi-sensei to return him to his home, even though he barely sees Mikoto-chan as a mother and hates Itachi-sensei. Opening his eyes, Naruto showed off a pair of fully matured Sharingan eyes. Minato watched silently as Naruto left just as he had entered in a gust of wind and sighed heavily, wondering just how he could make amends with his son, not knowing that they may have burnt that bridge by not showing any proof of being truly reconciliatory. He may not have given an answer, but I am sure that he will do the right thing. He has a far stronger code of honor than I do. The only person the Hokage could think of that would teach him that kind of code would be his teacher Itachi. Even though Naruto wouldn't admit who taught him, it was clear through the Crow contract and summons that Itachi was Naruto's teacher, at least to Minato. Itachi was always very fair, but he was never one to put his ideals on someone else actively. So who taught you how to act, Naruto? Minato asked himself, looking out through his window into the dark sky looming over the world. Naruto came to a sudden halt traveling under the moonlit night when he saw something out of the ordinary on ground level. Hopping off of the branch that he was standing on, Naruto walked towards what appeared to be a dome of rock and soil. Slowly strolling around the dome, Naruto saw that one whole side of the earthen structure was blown out. Naruto's keen inspection of the odd structure was suddenly halted when he heard what sounded like a bang followed by a loud crash only few hundred yards into the trees behind him. Narrowing his crimson eyes, Naruto quickly made his way into the forestry. At an urgent yet cautious pace, Naruto made his way through the thick woods, making sure to keep his eyes on the lookout for potential shinobi under the employ of one Snake Sannin. Naruto's cursed eyes picked up on an evil energy saturating the air, as well as a visible chakra that was almost being suffocated by the evil energy that he assumed was the work of the curse mark. Naruto came to a sudden halt, seeing when he saw two figures exchanging fists beneath him, with one being slammed into the ground and kicked away from the other figure, who remained still. Choji was left panting as he tried to force himself to stand up despite all of the punishment that Jirobo, one of the Sound Four, had dealt. Managing to make it to a sitting position with the help of the tree that was supporting a majority of his weight, the exhausted leaf shinobi looked to his opponent, whose skin was crimson thanks to the effects of the cursed mark. Another deep breath escaped from his opened lips before he looked down into his clenched hand, or more specifically, what was in his hand. Unfurling his fingers, Choji was greeted by the sight of a small glass case that was separated into 3 equal compartments. The first 2 slots were empty, but the third and final compartment was filled by a small red pill. "Sorry, Shikamaru, but this is the only way to keep this guy from going after you." With a somber smile on his face, Choji slipped his thumb under the lid and popped open the container. He didn't want to die, of course, but if it was to help his best friend, he'd do it 100 out of 100 times. "I have seen enough." Naruto's cool voice shocked both Oto and Konoha Shinobi as he suddenly appeared between Choji and Jirobo, the action stopping Choji from taking his 3rd food pill and the imminent death that followed its use. Jirobo's eyes narrowed as he stared at the other Uchiha that his master had mentioned before they went to assist Sasuke. Natural curiosity took over as the Sound Nin's eyes slowly went higher to get a good look at the boy he was supposed to capture if he came across. Jirobo scoffed after his very brief examination of the young Uchiha, not thinking much of his appearance or his ability to be a worthy foe. Naruto watched as his opponent clearly tried to evaluate him just by appearance and could help but be reminded of the old adage of not judging a book by its cover. When he saw the man's gaze get drawn into the naturally hypnotic appearance of the Sharingan, Naruto's curled into a smirk, since he could easily win a battle if his opponent was going to let him use his ocular prowess. Sharingan Genjutsu. Sleep. Jirobo's head slumped forward after he stared back at Naruto for a few moments, making it easy for the Chunin to change the flow of chakra to the brain with the powers of his Sharingan. As soon as his consciousness fled from his frame, the curse mark transformation started to reverse itself, clearly needing its wielder to be conscious to have an effect. Freeing twilight from its bindings, Naruto channeled his lightning chakra through it, coating it with a violet chakra. Once Naruto was close enough, he quickly drove the length of his katana through the man's heart, killing him instantly. Yanking his blade free of the larger dead man, the charm he had received from Narumi flicked and bounced off his hand. Making a shadow clone to explain things to Choji, Naruto raced ahead, knowing he still had a number of issues left to deal with, leaving the Kage Bunshin to take the injured Akimichi back to Konoha. Naruto had only traveled another 5 minutes closer to the land of patties when he came upon another pair of bodies stewed about on the forest floor. Coming to a crouched stop, the first pulse Naruto checked was that of Niji's, and he could tell the genin was in critical condition. Wasting no time, he had a shadow clone bring back Niji's body, while Naruto used a fire jutsu to burn the body of the dead Otonin. That's 2 dead Orochimaru servants and 2 living Konoha genin. The mission has gone well thus far, but can they hold out long enough for me to stop that fool? Naruto said, looking up as a faint, black cloud passed over the moon, covering its brilliance to his eyes. Blowing the bang out of his eye, Naruto quickly took off to see who he would find next. The leader of the team sent by Konoha was currently crouching down on the limb of a tree, frowning at the smirking Sound Kunoichi across from him. His mission had gone terribly thus far because he had lost a member in pursuit of Sasuke each time an enemy came to fight them, which was not best for the success of the mission, and he knew it. He only hoped that Lee could manage to stop Sasuke before he made it past the border, where he would be lost for who knows how long. This is a disaster. I should have come up with a better strategy. I am the squad leader. It is expected of me. The red-headed Kunoichi from Otogekure saw the frustration on the shadow manipulator's face and smirked cruelly at his distress. Her skin and eyes also heavily morphed thanks to the influence of Orochimaru's curse mark. What's the matter, leaf fucker? Did you just realize how useless it is for such a weakling to fight Orochimaru-sama's power? It even appeared that she had horns growing from the side of her head, truly topping off the devilish visage that Tayuya had gained due to the curse mark. Getting back up to a standing position, Shikamaru glared at the vulgar woman while trying to formulate a plan that could get him close enough so he could finish her, but there was a problem. The problem was the sound-based genjutsu that she used that kept him away, or he'd be captured and killed. Shikamaru began to mumble to himself as his brain worked on trying to come up with some kind of plan while on the fly and nearing defeat. Damn it! Why did Kiba have to run off without thinking? How do I get her to lose the flute? Perhaps I can help you with that problem, Naruto said just before he dropped onto the tree limb that Shikamaru was positioned on. His sudden appearance had Shikamaru staring at him in both immense relief and surprise, not thinking they'd be getting support so soon, or from the person he couldn't find when creating this team. Originally, Naruto was the second choice for the team after Choji, but Shikamaru couldn't find him even after asking Fu, who was at his apartment complex. Another weak-ass fucker comes to die? That's fine with me. The question and following statement came from Tayuya's mouth as she smirked at Naruto, who returned her look with an emotionless Sharingan stare. The redhead frowned at the lack of a response from the raven-haired Uzumaki, not finding taunts any fun if there was no response. It was like trying to have a meaningful conversation with a wall. Wait, if you are coming from that way, that means that Choji and Niji are… Shikamaru trailed off before Naruto shook his head with a small smirk, telling Shikamaru silently that their comrades were just fine, not that they wanted Tayuya to know that. Some secrets were better left off unsaid after all. What a foul mouth. Naruto said more to himself than to either Shikamaru or the now sneering Tayuya. Shaking his head, Naruto decided that analyzing his opponent's mannerisms would be meaningless. The Chunin turned to Shikamaru, who looked much more relaxed than he was before Naruto's arrival. What can you tell me about her skills? Naruto asked, trusting the Nara's ability to deduce just how capable an opponent was. There really isn't much tell other than she is capable of producing sound-based genjutsu thanks to that flute of hers, but that shouldn't be a problem for you, which is good because I am running low on chakra. Shikamaru admitted, taking a deep breath as he watched Tayuya go for the flute that she lowered down once Naruto arrived on the scene. Back up in a one-on-one fight meant that he had an advantage now in the form of a fresh body. Naruto looked away from Shikamaru towards Tayuya, who was still glaring at Naruto for whatever reason. Then, out of nowhere, Naruto shook his head, silently confusing Shikamaru as to why he did so. The Sharingan may be the ultimate tool for genjutsu, but that only works out on vision-based genjutsu. However, I have a plan of my own to finish this woman off quickly. Shikamaru frowned at that piece of knowledge but nodded, curious as to what Naruto had planned for their shared opponent. I will allow myself to be captured in her genjutsu, but at the same time capture her in one of my own. This will give you the opening to finish the job. Naruto's confidence in him surprised the Nara, since most people would think he would do something lazy at the most important time, but not Naruto. Giving Naruto one last glance, Shikamaru eventually nodded with a small sigh escaping from his lips, since he knew Naruto would not back down because he clearly thought that this was the best plan of attack. He maneuvered his hands so he could perform his shadow possession technique if he needed to. Troublesome. Fine, we will do things your way, but just be careful. I don't need your sisters kicking my ass because you got careless. Shikamaru wasn't certain, but he was sure that Naruto shot him an amused smirk before he took off directly at Tayuya. The red-haired woman looked at Naruto with a single eyebrow cocked in an act of surprise, since she was sure he would be smarter than that, but an easy win was a win that she'd take. Bringing the mouthpiece of her flute up to her lips, Tayuya began to play a beautiful, yet haunting melody that traveled at Naruto at the speed of sound. Naruto could feel the chakra-infused sound invading his ears, and no sooner did his body start to freeze up on a branch only 2 hops away from the red-headed musician. Feigning an act of defiance, Naruto glared into her eyes while keeping a victorious smirk from his lips as he thought the name of his own genjutsu. Demonic illusion. False surroundings. Man fucker, you sure are stupid to get caught just like that. Seriously, how shitty of a shinobi are you? Tayuya asked, making a complete mockery of Naruto's shinobi skills as she used her flute to summon Doki, so she could make use of another of her techniques. Her eyes panned to Shikamaru, who appeared to be standing in the same spot, glaring at her thanks to Naruto's genjutsu. It's time for you to die, shithead. Revolt of the Demon World. Once again, Tayuya started to play a melody using her flute as a catalyst. Naruto's eyes could only watch as a phantasm slowly crawled out of the mouth of the big, humanoid creature standing behind the musician. The only things clearly materialized on the ghostly body were mouths with sharp teeth barred. Suddenly, the ghost moved towards him and took a bite out of his side. Naruto could feel most of his chakra leave him, which concerned him. Luckily for Naruto, before the spirit could take a second meal from him, the Oto Kunoichi's eyes widened and her technique and genjutsu fell without her ability to keep it sustained. What they? The redhead asked in a confused stammer when she dropped her flute for no reason, then found that she couldn't move her body at all to retrieve it. Naruto ignored her and walked forward, canceling his Sharingan to recover some of his chakra. Reaching behind his back for Twilight, Naruto was stopped from ending his second Oto Nin by Shikamaru's voice. No, Naruto, I will take care of this one. Shikamaru said seriously, stopping the raven-haired Chunin in his place. Naruto's blue eyes trailed past the fearful Oto Nin to Shikamaru, where the two engaged in a silent staring competition. Naruto was looking for any uncertainty, but seeing nothing but determination, he nodded and stopped just before grabbing his katana. Sending Naruto a nod of gratitude, the Nara heir made a slight change to his hand sign. Shadow sowing. From the one tendril of darkness that linked Shikamaru to Tayuya came 8 others, 4 on each side. Every single wisp of darkness waved about unpredictably before they all suddenly tensed, and then just like that each tendril became tangible and sewed themselves into Tayuya's rigid body. A resounding cry of pain and some blood came from the kunoichi's mouth before one last tendril went clean through her heart, ending her momentary torture. Feeling no resistance at the end of his shadow, Shikamaru called off his technique with a small sigh as he stared down at the lifeless body he had just created, trying to come to terms with what he just did. He was snapped out from his funk when Naruto put his hand on the Nara's shoulder. Knowing Naruto wasn't one to have the whole feelings conversation, Shikamaru went straight to business. Kiba trailed off to fight another one of those sound Nin, so I'll go help him, then we will both return to the village. Lee went ahead after Sasuke, so you go on ahead and finish the mission and I'll see you back at the village. Staring at Shikamaru, whose shoulders were slumped slightly, and a tired grin put on his face, Naruto eventually nodded and vanished within a wind shunshin, leaving the Nara to go and fetch his Inuzuka teammate. Sasuke-kun, I beg you to return back to Konoha. Don't let Orochimaru dampen your flames of youth with his nasty curse mark. Think about Sakura-chan and all of your friends back at home. The green spandex-wearing Leaf Genin tried to help his comrade see reason through what he thought was best, and that was sentiment. Lee could see the vile markings spread across Sasuke's face along with a swirl of dark energy, but could not act because of the man standing between he and Sasuke. It was truly annoying to be so close to your goal yet still being so far away. Sasuke's head slowly turned to look at whoever it was that called his name, the shadows of the night covering the half of his face except for the one Sharingan eye that glowed a menacing red to go perfectly with the evil chakra embracing him. All of you back in that village are nothing but fools who know nothing about pain or power. Orochimaru has the power that I need to make my ambitions reality. You who cannot even perform a single jutsu are not in a position to convince me of anything. With what he felt that needed to be said, Sasuke looked back to the border of his home and his power, Orochimaru's power in the curse mark, drawing him towards the snake Sannin. Taking off into the woods, Lee could only clench his fists in frustration since it was clear the man with the ability to manipulate his bones would not let him pass. This would be easier if I could use the inner gates, but Gai-sensei made me promise not to use them again until my body was completely healed. I will just have to beat Kimimaro-san with my guts and determination. When it looked like Sasuke would make it to the snake summoner without any kind of resistance, a black blur raced across the field hot on his tracks. Of course this person was seen by both Kimimaro and Lee, but neither shinobi took a step towards the person as they sped across the grassy field. Soon the rustling of the leaves and the sound of their movements left the area, leaving both Kagaya and Taijutsu user alone in the night. You did not attack my fellow Leaf Shinobi when you had the perfect chance to do so. May I ask why that is, Kimimaro-san? Lee asked before dropping into his strong fist taijutsu stance, wondering just how he would crack the dead bone pulse of his counterpart from the village hidden by the sound. If I had attacked that boy, then you would have had the perfect chance to strike me down, possibly before even I could reach him. With Orochimaru-sama's power flowing in Sasuke's veins, there is not a single chance that he will lose, Kimimaro said emotionlessly as 2 bone swords popped from his forearms, giving him a pair of weapons to use against the close-ranged fighter. I may not like you, Uchiha, but you are the only person that can save Sasuke-kun. I know that will bring a smile to Sakura's face, so for her sake I hope that you will succeed. Lee thought before lowering himself so he could do rid with the leg weights that were wrapped around his lower shins. Sasuke came to a stop inside of the Valley of the End, the place where the final, legendary clash between Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha occurred. It was the place where Hashirama put down the legendary traitor to the Leaf and returned to his home the conquering hero. It was a place that reminded Sasuke of how much prejudice was directed at the Uchiha, where even history mocked them. Sasuke looked down to his hands with a smirk as the curse marks spread around his body, now completely putting him in stage 1 of his progression. He never felt better, however not once had he felt so powerful. Not when he first learnt the Grand Fireball, not even when he learnt the Chidori from Kakashi. No, it was clear to the Uchiha that it was Orochimaru's power that made him strongest, and this feeling only solidified his decision. Glancing behind him with his Sharingan blazing, Sasuke disappeared in a leaf shunshin. Cutting through the air that Sasuke was just occupying was a wave of gray energy that cut deeply into the shins of the Madara statue. The cut was deep, but not deep enough to cause the statue to fall. Sasuke reappeared clinging to Madara's thigh with his chakra staring smugly at Naruto, who was standing on the rocks at the base of the waterfall slowly, putting his katana back, seeing that his last move failed. I should have known you'd be the one to come before me. You want one more last taste of true power before I go and get even stronger? Sasuke asked smugly, looking into Naruto's blue eyes as he dropped down to stand on the feet of Madara's statue. He felt proud being able to brag about the special power the curse mark was infusing him with. Even though Sasuke couldn't see it, Naruto was arching the eyebrow that was behind the bang that fell over his left eye. Despite seeing and hearing it so many times, Naruto still couldn't comprehend what drove Sasuke to make such a proclamation. Even his pride didn't need that kind of stroking, and he was a clan head. I am here because the Hokage asked me to retrieve you. Personally, I think you are a waste of time and space who thinks he is important because he was spoiled by the parasites in the village. Naruto replied in a cool voice, telling Sasuke of what he had felt since the day he ran into him on the way to Nami no Kuni. Sasuke glared hatefully at the Uchiha standing at the base of the waterfall for the way he spoke of him. What made the insults worse was the way they were said, the cold tone cutting deeper than any words could cut. Sasuke couldn't believe his power was still in doubt, but he would show Naruto once and for all. That's it. I will kill you here and throw your body in the river. Naruto's blue eyes showed alarm when Sasuke suddenly appeared in front of him and punched him, and hard. The power of the punch carried Naruto's body into one of the rocky walls that encompassed the valley. Groaning in pain, Naruto looked up to see Sasuke already on top of his position with a cruel smirk on his face. Naruto covered his face with his arms, allowing Sasuke to continuously pound his fists into the Hokage's son's stomach. He's faster with the curse mark. Without my Sharingan up, I can't keep good enough track of his movements to counter or dodge. I need to up my speed for certain after this is all over. How do you like that, you bastard of an Uchiha? Do you still think I am a waste of space now? Ha! Sasuke shouted at Naruto between his laughter, the strikes coming in too quick for the blonde to substitute. Over and over his fists came raining down on Naruto's body, much to the pleasure of the curse mark warrior. Grabbing Sasuke's wrist as he threw another careless but powerful punch was enough for Naruto to break Sasuke's continuous assault. Looking into the face of the angry Avenger, Naruto held the tiger sign with his free hand. Fire release, grand fireball. Thanks to the proximity of the two, the flames blasted into Sasuke's face before they could expand and become more powerful. The weakened fires only served to push Sasuke off Naruto and towards the opposite canyon wall, which was what Naruto wanted. Sasuke stood on the opposite wall laughing as Naruto stood up, some blood trickling down from his mouth. When he stopped laughing, Sasuke looked at Naruto like an insect waiting to be crushed. You call that a fire jutsu? Here, let me show you some true fire power, you imposter. Sasuke quickly went through the signs for what was becoming his favorite fire jutsu. Fire release, Dragon Flame Bomb. Naruto called upon his Sharingan when he saw that Sasuke was ready to call a fire jutsu, knowing he might not get another chance to activate it if he returned to Taijutsu. Naruto, who was ready to exchange with his own fire jutsu, called his own powerful flame technique. Fire release, Majestic Flame Destroyer. The fierce-looking dragon skull rushed out towards the center of the river, where it met the expanding wall of flames that was originating from Naruto's mouth. The two flames swallowed each other over the center of the river, lighting up the valley in a glorious orange glow. The surface of the water reflected the struggle of one fire trying to overtake the other until both flames died into embers that flickered into the night sky. The moment both flames were gone, the two Uchiha met in the center of the river, fist meeting fist, as each tried to overtake the other with a fierce taijutsu approach. Sasuke found that the small advantage that the curse mark had given him was neutralized by the Sharingan, though to Naruto's growing agitation he couldn't land any kind of meaningful blow either. Both fighters sensed this and pushed back, taking a stand at other ends of the riverbanks. Standing there panting slightly, Naruto took the time to recover the chakra he was running low on thanks to the two fights prior and the chakra draining ghost. The raven-haired clan head knew he could only perform one more jutsu like his majestic flame destroyer on his own chakra. Tell me, Sasuke, how does it feel to know that even with the snake's power, you are only on even footing with me? Sasuke snarled at Naruto for saying what he did. Even if it was true, Sasuke still desired to have more strength than Naruto. It was this desire that triggered stage 2 of the curse mark, using his anger and hatred to feed itself. Sasuke's skin started to turn dark gray, his eyes morphing back to normal before changing to yellow 4-pointed stars. His lips changed to a blue color and 2 fleshy wings sprouted from his back like some kind of corrupted angel. Would you look at that? It seems like I do have more power in store that makes me special, Naruto. Too bad you don't have anything like that to save your life. Sasuke spoke condescendingly as he started to gather chakra in his hand. Strangely enough, Sasuke's chakra began to show signs of turning black, but before it could finish, Sasuke's Chidori was completed, and his wings carried him towards Naruto. Naruto, seeing the speed at which Sasuke was traveling, quickly activated his Fujin no Yoroi and raced towards Sasuke, his speed amplified by the wind. Taking his katana out and flowing wind-natured chakra through the blade, Naruto's eyes tried to find a way to strike without being stabbed by the Chidori, and when he thought he found a way, Sasuke shifted. The new pattern of flight struck Naruto in the shoulder, but it was only glancing while Naruto's blade impaled itself into one of Sasuke's wings. Both teens' bodies registered the pain at the same time, resulting in simultaneous cries of pain. Naruto skidded back, holding his bleeding shoulder, while Sasuke went down, spiraling into the water twilight, making it impossible for his aerial capabilities to work. Naruto stood there on one knee as his wind armor faded away thanks to Naruto not having enough chakra to maintain the jutsu. He looked over to the bubbles coming up just in front of the waterfall and tried to contact the Kyuubi. Kyuubi, I know I don't ask to use your chakra, but I am running low and need a boost. The Kyuubi, who heard his plea, grunted in acknowledgement as he slowly pushed some of his potent yokai into Naruto's system. Very well, I shall give you some of my power, but you can only handle one tail since we didn't do any training as of yet. Also, not even Kami will help you should you lose to that brat. Naruto nodded to the Kyuubi's warning, and just before a red cloak of vibrant yokai shrouded him. The Kyuubi's cloak. Naruto's eyes faded from Sharingan red with 3 tomo to a crimson red with a vertical slit in the center. One tail of red energy formed, swaying behind him as the regenerative yokai went to work patching up Naruto's shoulder wound. Breaking the surface of the water was Naruto's twilight, and the blade was flying directly for his head. But before the projectile could reach its destination, the tail behind Naruto looped around the handle, catching it easily. By the time Naruto put his katana away, Sasuke was standing on the water in front of the waterfall, looking at Naruto in shock, his wing bleeding slightly. You thought you were the only special one around here, Sasuke? The power of the Kyuubi distorted Naruto's voice, making it sound truly dark and powerful, the result of which infuriating the rage-driven Sasuke. Once again, a chirping filled the area, overtaking the sound of the waterfall, only this time the chakra was completely black and corrupted. I will show you what's special is, you freak, Sasuke shouted, not really knowing what that evil red energy was. An energy that was even eviler than the curse mark. Naruto said nothing in response of the poorly thought out insult, deciding that actions would serve him far better than words in this situation. Opening his right hand, a fierce, compressed wind started to compact itself in Naruto's hand, creating a vacuum effect inside of the sphere. Naruto's wind sphere turned into a crimson shade of red thanks to the Kyuubi's power lingering in his system as the primary power source. Both shinobi launched themselves at the other with their attacks ready. Chidori / wind release, demon vacuum sphere. The piercing lightning technique met the powerful wind sphere in a huge collision that pushed off waves of chakra off of each shinobi as their attacks clashed like a battle of wills. Sasuke's curse mark enhanced Chidori slowly started to crack through the red vacuum sphere. An initial success. However, before the stab could cut any deeper, Naruto's affinity advantage and powerful Biju energy won out and broke through the lightning with a massive explosion that went off in Sasuke's face, sending him rocketing back into the waterfall and into the rock wall behind it. Naruto too was caught in the blast, but the Kyuubi's cloak protected him from the damage of the explosion. Naruto called off the protective cloak of demonic energy with a rare smile on his face as he started to walk off to the waterfall. He had gotten in 3 progressively more difficult fights and had come out victorious each time, pushing himself to new limits even he didn't know he had. Now all he needed to do was retrieve the cargo, if you will, and it was all over. Or that's what he thought until he heard someone speak from behind him. "Hello, Naruto-kun.